Hi, good afternoon, everybody. I'd like to welcome you here. My name is Michael Lind. I'm the Policy Director of the Economic Growth Program at the New America Foundation. And the event today is brought to you by the Next Social Contract Initiative. The topic today is paid family leave insurance, something that the vast majority of developed countries has today. The U.S. is something of a laggard in this respect. We're looking at it in the context of rethinking the social contract for the 21st century. The American social contract in its present form was devised largely during the New Deal period, largely different era, when you had a long-term employment for much of the male workforce in large vertically integrated corporations. You had a majority of women stayed at home and were homemakers. In the past half century, the economy has been transformed almost beyond recognition by trends like globalization and technological progress, the rise of the service sector. But in many of the areas of economic security and workplace arrangements, we're still kind of living in the 1950s and 1960s. And so our interest in the family leave issue arises in the context of this more comprehensive look at the changing social contract in the 21st century. We're privileged to have with us today to discuss this topic Betsey Stevenson. She is Chief Economist to Secretary of Labor Hilda Solis. She's currently on leave from her position as an Assistant Professor of Business and Policy at the University of Pennsylvania's Wharton School. Dr. Stevenson is a Research Associate with the National Bureau of Economic Research. She's affiliated with both the Labor Studies and the Law and Economics programs. She's also a Fellow of the IFO Institute for Economic Research in Munich and a visiting scholar at the San Francisco Federal Reserve. She serves on the board of directors of the American Law and Economics Association. Dr. Stevenson has published widely in leading economics journals about the impact of public policies on the labor market, with a focus on women and families. She's written widely on subjective well-being. In addition, she earned a BA in economics and mathematics from Wellesley College and an MA and PhD in economics from Harvard University. We'll have a discussion of her comments following the talk, and also we'll have the authors of this new report, Family Security Insurance, a New Foundation for Economic Security, discuss their work. But first, please join me in welcoming Dr. Betsey Stevenson. Thank you.
Thank you so much. It's my pleasure to be here. I was asked to come here today and talk about how paid family leave impacts families, the workforce, and the economy. As an academic, I study how families and workplaces are changing as men and women increasingly play equal roles in and outside the home. Most families are successfully adapting to these changes. In my research, I've emphasized how marriages have become stronger with a divorce rate that has been falling for the last 35 years, something I find people are often confused about, but our families are becoming stronger, and women continue to shatter glass ceilings and make strides in occupations long thought to be the province of men. And men are spending more time with their children and in the home and less time at work. As families are becoming more balanced with everyone chipping in, yet society isn't making it easy. Both men and women want and need time off to adjust to the arrival of a new child in the home, and both men and women need the flexibility to care for their own and their family's needs, like taking a sick child to the doctor or caring for an elder parent. Too many families fear losing pay or their job if they take that time, and we need to remove that insecurity. But it's hard for a small employer to shoulder that burden on their own, and that's the beauty of the California paid leave program. It creates a system that shares responsibility and works for everyone. When my daughter was born, both my partner Justin and I had the luxury of taking time away from work without losing pay. Justin was an equal partner from the beginning, from working with me to learn how to breastfeed, something that very much confused the lactation consultants in the hospital, to changing diapers. And we now have a 1.5-year-old who talks a lot about her mama dada, which she refers to as one person who's interchangeable and preferred to be together in our jointness. Our experience meant that we both got a chance to bond with our daughter, provide care, and do some productive work in the first few months of our daughter's life. We were able to accomplish this because our employer, as an academic, gave us both the flexibility and the financial support. Secretary Solis places the discussion of paid leave in the overall context of her mission, which is good jobs for everyone, which she believes is key to restoring our middle class. A good job pays a living wage and can support a family. A good job ensures workplaces are safe and healthy and ensures that workers have a voice. And a good job allows for work-life flexibility. And this is why improving work-family balance issues, work-life flexibility, is one of her missions. As you know, the Federal Family and Medical Leave Act allows most workers to take job-protected time off, which is significant, but as you know, millions of families cannot afford to use unpaid leave. And a handful of states, like California, have enacted policies to offer paid leave, but more states should have the chance. And we also need to have this conversation at the national level, which I know is something that folks here today will emphasize. Most workers who can afford to take leave from work rely on a patchwork of employer-provided benefits, such as paid sick leave, vacation, disability insurance, and/or parental and family leave. It's really an untenable situation. As we know, these issues affect all families, but they're even more challenging for low-wage earners who frequently have the least access to workplace flexibility and perhaps the most need. We also know that these are the families that do currently have the most instability and the highest divorce rates. And I really wish more people understood the connection between these issues. Being stressed at work and stressed at home makes it difficult for families to thrive, and it makes it difficult to be a productive employee. Those who truly care about improving marriages and decreasing divorce need to join together with those who care about improving workplace flexibility. This should be a united issue because they're really, really intricately connected. Unfortunately, you all know we don't have a budget approved, and in fact, the clock is a-ticking on that one. So it's not clear when we will, hopefully soon. But I emphasize this because the administration is committed to promoting state development of paid leave programs that provide leave to employees for reasons covered under the Family Medical Leave Act, such as birth or adoption or caring for a sick relative. And the president's included in the 2012 budget a state paid leave fund, which will provide grants to assist additional states to establish paid leave programs. But it is important now, it's important before, and I think it's becoming even more important by the day, that we have and build bipartisan support for work-family measures. It's certainly important not only at the federal level, but also at the state level, where resources for new initiatives are becoming hard to come by. Let me tell you a little bit about the president's plan that was included in the budget. Currently, California and New Jersey offer paid state leave programs, which are called family leave insurance, and Washington State has enacted but not yet implemented such a program. Typically, the programs are state-run insurance programs financed by employer or employee contributions, and the programs offer up to 6 weeks leave to workers for reasons covered by the FMLA. In doing so, the programs may enhance job retention for many workers or help workers stay on their career paths. So the idea of the grants is that they would provide to assist states in planning or startup activities related to these kind of state paid leave programs. So in addition to support for the state paid leave programs, the administration has done several other things to help improve workplace flexibility, including expanding coverage of FMLA for military families, increasing the tax credit for child care and elder care in the 2011 budget, and increasing these credits for low-income family as part of the tax package that was signed at the end of the year. At the Department of Labor, we're working on gathering new data to better inform family leave policies and paid family leave policies, because we don't actually have a great idea of what kind of access people currently have to paid family leave, how much they take, what kind of access they have to unpaid leave. And so we're doing a number of initiatives to actually study that question, both surveying individuals and surveying firms to understand how, when, and why people use the FMLA. And I think another important thing that we have done under the Affordable Care Act is to require employers to provide nursing mothers with reasonable break time and a private space for expressing breast milk at work. As a woman who nursed, can tell you that as I sat in my private office and pumped, I often thought about our receptionist who had just had a child around the same time I did, and frankly, I had no idea whether she had options to breastfeed or not. And when I finally asked about it, I was told that on Penn's campus, there is a room for her to express milk in. Of course, it's halfway across campus, and she would have to, spend 15 minutes walking there and 15 minutes back if she wanted to do that. And I made me realize just how different these job characteristics are. With someone with my private office, I was able to easily fit this in, and it wasn't clear to me, and I didn't ask her whether this is a reason in her stopping breastfeeding, but obviously when we increase the barriers for some women, we should allow women to make this choice without having to choose between their job and breastfeeding. So let me end on talking more generally about paid family leaves in the economy, because one question I was asked to address is how paid family leave will impact the economy. And the thing I hear repeatedly from employers is that they have two big human resource concerns: finding talent and keeping talent. And my response is that providing leave to take care of families is the best way you can ensure that you find the best talent and that you keep the best talent. For too long, companies have lost valuable female employees, and more often women, because the women simply couldn't make job and family work. Some companies are starting to realize this, and those are the companies that actively recruit former female employees who've taken time off after having a child to come back. And some employers are adopting workplace flexibility plans and finding that they are actually improving retention dramatically, and helping them hold that talent. But some firms simply haven't gotten the message. And just to give you a little bit of a sense of this, the importance of talent in the economy and making sure we keep women attached to the labor force. As a country, women hold 1.6 million more bachelor's degrees than men do. A lot of our talent resides in our women. Yet when we turn to the labor force among those employed, men hold most of the bachelor's degrees. Where does this gap come from? It's because too many women are not able to combine work and family. Too many women step out of the labor force. And so when we're looking at the loss of female talent is so extensive that by the time we get to the employed population, we see that there are 1.3 million more bachelor's degrees held by men than held by women. I think that this loss of talent, this extensive loss of talent, holds us back as a nation, and it hurts both the overall country as well as individual firms. Now, I was also recently taking a look at the wage gap, and I'm sure all of you can repeat in your sleep the wage gap. Women's median weekly earnings are about 80% of men's. But what you may not realize is what that means in terms of growth over time. On average, the weekly pay of a male high school graduate rises, the weekly median pay of a male high school graduate rises by about $3.50 for every year as they age between 25 and 65. Now, first of all, you might realize just how low the pay growth is for high school grads, that men, for every year that they work, they get an extra $3.50 a week. Yet for women, that's less than $2 a week that they get for every year as they age. For college graduates, the gains are bigger. Their income grows more over time, but the gap is the same. It's still about $1.50. Men's earnings are growing by about 6.25 every year, weekly earnings, while women's are growing by 4 3/4. these numbers add up to thousands over a lifetime. And if you look at the median woman, by the time she's 65, she will have lost nearly $400,000. So finally, let me simply say that what research is increasingly showing is that women are staying in fields that provide workplace flexibility, that allow them to take time off to care for their families. And for instance, a field like veterinary medicine was once dominated by men, has become dominated by women. And I'm sure there's some people out there who think that there's something about cuddly cats and kittens that's drawing women into veterinary medicine. But I'm here to tell you that's not it. It's that they don't get penalized in their pay when they take time off to take care of their families. That's the bottom line. If you are out of the labor force for a year, for 6 months, for 2 months, you don't get whacked when you come back in terms of your earnings growth stopping. And yet when I look at my female MBA students at Wharton, I know that if they stop for even a moment once they have a child, they're going to fall far, far behind their male classmates. And in fact, that is what happens. And as a result, by the time we look 10, 15 years after graduation from an MBA program, we see that there's been an enormous drop-off in women who are still working at all and who are still working in their chosen field. And the pay gap between the men and women is enormous. So if we want to continue, I think the president talks extensively about the importance of innovating as an economy, the importance of allocating our talent to its most productive place in society. And in order to do that, we need to make sure that people are able to integrate their family needs with their workplace needs. And that is the way, by allowing that flexibility, by removing the insecurity, by letting people do both, we'll make sure that we can grow as fast as possible and be as productive as possible as a nation. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Stevenson, for that overview of the subject, particularly the workplace and gender issues, which are fascinating. I'm sure they will provoke a lot of discussion. Dr. Stevenson very generously has agreed to stay here for the question and answer period at the end of this session. So we look forward to that. I'm now going to introduce our next two speakers, Katie Corrigan and Ann O'Leary. Katie Corrigan is the Director of Workplace Flexibility 2010, a public policy initiative at Georgetown Law. She's responsible for overseeing Workplace Flexibility 2010's campaign to support the development of comprehensive national policy on workplace flexibility, including political strategy, legislative lawyering, and policy research. Corrigan has over a decade of experience working in the federal legislative arena. She was legal counsel on disability policy for Senator Tom Harkin on the Senate Health, Education, Labor, and Pensions Committee. And she served as the lead Senate staffer on a range of disability legislation. She was also a legislative counsel at the American Civil Liberties Union, where she worked on privacy issues and led coalition efforts that included organizations from across the political spectrum. Ann O'Leary is lecturer in residence and executive director of the Berkeley Center on Health, Economic, and Family Security. She's also a senior fellow with the Center for American Progress. Previously, Ann O'Leary served as a deputy city attorney for the city of San Francisco, a law clerk to the U.S. Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals Judge John T. Noonan, Jr. From 2001 to 2003, she was a legislative director for Senator Hillary Rodham Clinton. Prior to that, O'Leary served in a number of positions in the Clinton administration, including special assistant to the president in the Domestic Policy Council, policy advisor to the First Lady, and senior policy advisor to the Secretary of Education. Together with Heather Boucher, O'Leary co-edited the Shriver Report, A Woman's Nation Changes Everything. She received her bachelor's degree from Mount Holyoke College, her master's degree from Stanford University, and her law degree from UC Berkeley School of Law. Ann O'Leary and Katie Corrigan have worked together on the Family Security Insurance, a new foundation for economic security, which is a joint project of Berkeley Law and the Workplace Flexibility 2010 project. Beginning with Katie, they will tell us about this project. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And really, thank you to the New America Foundation for the invitation to speak on our report today. I was struck in hearing your remarks and and hearing Betsey's, that this issue, I mean, just taking a moment, this issue over the last 10 years, you have the New America Foundation embedding this conversation in its broader social contract discussion. So it's not a side note, it wasn't kind of second tier, but rather, part and parcel of this bigger conversation they've been having for the past year. And that you have a chief economist at the Department of Labor who's speaking, again, not kind of cribbing notes off of someone else's, in desperate measure of, wait, what do I say on this issue, but rather someone who's an expert in it, represented at a very high level in our government. And also an economist. Something, I think it shows this issue shifting away and people starting to see this as part and parcel of the broader discussions around the economy and what should we be doing regarding the economy in the 21st century. And also, of course, I have to say the word budget today, that, how does this intersect with conversations around our federal budget? So first, I want to thank Anna Leary and her colleagues at Berkeley for working with us at Georgetown on what was really a year and a half of pretty hard work to produce that bright red document in front of you. I guess two things. One, as you heard from my bio, out of the many people that contributed to this report, including Sharon Masling and Pierce Blue on my staff, I would say that I was the least legal in this process, that I was the one sort of trying to think through how does this intersect with some of the broader politics. And I was also the one where, in talking with friends, particularly the day before the government might shut down, the politics seem lined up against this. It seems fairly bold to talk about a big new social policy program when so many others are coming under fire. But I can tell you, sometimes it's good to have clarity of purpose. And certainly we don't shy away from those conversations because we believe this proposal really cuts to the heart of how are we going to sustain our families, our local economies over the long haul. How do we keep people working, healthy, productive, in the context of what we know is a very competitive environment? So we don't think there is a conversation that could be more relevant as America thinks about how to move through the recession, maintain a balanced budget, and really keep our values intact. As you'll hear from Anne, and as you read in the report, there are many factors: family income security, child development, productivity, labor force attachment, better health outcomes. All of these combine to make this particular issue one that we think merits a big picture national conversation. But this is particularly true during economic times when many families simply can't can't afford to take unpaid time off to care for their families, even when it's the most pressing or important event. And I think, as Betsey alluded to, not only that, but they're afraid, even if they have the policy on the books, they're afraid to use it for fear of jeopardy. They need that job. They don't want to be denied a promotion based on the fact that they took time for caregiving or other reasons. So here's a snapshot of the situation. Current access to paid time off for health and caregiving comes nowhere near meeting the demand. It's a bold statement. We have lots and lots of evidence of that in our report. We really look forward to the Department of Labor's next iteration of its data set on family medical leave and what people have and what people don't. But we cobbled together what we could based on the current data. And I think certainly the word patchwork is a pretty good and accurate description. I think of it as the current system running on the luck of the draw. Some companies offer some forms of paid time off. Others either can't afford it. We've heard that from lots of small and medium-sized companies, or presume that these issues are simply not part of their bottom line strategy. And I'm looking across the room and I know there are lots of business representatives here who know otherwise, particularly at SHRM and World at Work, but their message hasn't gotten out across the country to all businesses. So families hope for the best, muddle through, sometimes with dire consequences of really having to choose between work and your child. We know that from lots of low-wage workers. And really, depending on the type of work you do, what industry you're in, there's just huge variation across class, across gender. But even within some industries, you could have the same job in one shop, cross the street and go to another, and the policies around paid time off for caregiving and health reasons change. So really, I think this question of security, that is why we use the word security in the name of our report, is what we're going for. People have been cobbling things together, making tough choices, but even in the best of circumstances, it's a pretty insecure environment out there. Obviously, even more important than the short-term view, I alluded to this earlier, is the long-term payoff. There's lots of data in there around how addressing this issue head-on, rather than kind of piecemeal through lots of different things, will result in healthier kids and parents and older people. An informal caregiving network can complement the way our healthcare system is set up and we think save the government some money. Certainly the gender equity and equal opportunity issues are huge. I mean, alluding to the wage gap alone. Sustained labor force attachment by workers who have caregiving obligations is a good thing for everyone. We want people working, contributing, paying taxes. And then, like I said, just basic family income security. So I guess my invitation is, why would that not be enough to make the case for this as part and parcel of the big picture policy issues we need to grapple with? But I can tell you, not everyone is the New America Foundation, and not everyone has squarely put this on the top tier radar. So I took a moment and just looked back at some of the conversation around the Deficit Commission report that came out last year, because I think it does surface some of the issues we're thinking about in today's context. You know, the proposal last fall accepted the idea that people will work longer. You know, we're aging, we're going to work longer. But gosh, how are we going to make sure our system, both government policy and business practice, fits this new reality? It's not enough to say, well, people are going to have to work longer, so let's consider these other policies around Social Security or otherwise. You got to think about how that's going to work when, as you're aging, you're going to need time off to take care of yourself. As your parents are aging, you're going to need time off to take care of them. So how is this whole thing going to work together? People with disabilities, lots of conversation around Social Security and disability insurance. Well, right now people have to make the choice of either not working and going on the government rolls, or working and taking a pretty huge risk that they're not going to have the time off they need when they need it. Caregiving needs are exploding, you know, all of this gender equity issue, but honestly, and I really appreciate what the administration is doing with its paid leave fund and with its data collection, but I feel like what that should be is setting some breadcrumbs for a much bigger and robust conversation about how we can deal with this as a country. We'll have better data, we'll have even more experiments, hopefully, not just California and New Jersey to draw on. So I appreciate those programs, but really look at those as simply setting the stage for what I think needs to be a much bigger conversation. So just, I'm going to turn it over to Anne to get into the details of this. But I guess I'd heard a CEO speak at a Society for Human Resource Management event about 2 months ago. And you know, whether or not you agree with every detail in our report, or even with its basic you know, structure as a government policy, I think it's getting harder and harder to ignore that these issues around flexibility, whether that's flexible scheduling, predictable scheduling, or time off, aren't part of what every company, every local, state, and federal government official should be thinking about. The CEO had said, you know, this isn't like pizza on a Friday. This isn't just an extra gimme. This is actually about our core business strategy, because this is going to be how we retain the talent. And I would say it's not only for a policymaker about how you retain the talent, but it's about how do you sustain your community. And certainly families are the bedrock of that in our country. So we think you need to look at both the broader economic issues as they relate to one of those core foundations in terms of the family. So I'm going to turn it over to Anne. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Katie. And I just want to echo the thanks to the New America Foundation and to Betsey. What I'm going to do is to tell you what we're proposing here today. And I don't know how to turn this on, but at some point I will. There it goes. Oh, I have to make it bigger. Sorry, wait 1 second. Maybe if I just do this. Okay. Okay, I'm not doing a very good job with that. Never mind. I'll keep talking and then we'll figure this out. So we're here today to propose that the United States adopt a new family security insurance as part of what is the next social contract, really part of what Michael and Lauren and here at the New America Foundation people have been really thinking about in terms of what's next. Family security insurance would modernize our current social insurance scheme to provide income replacement when people take time off from work because of one of 3 significant life events: their own serious illness or temporary disability that renders them unable to perform a job. As Katie talked about, we have Social Security disability insurance if you become permanently disabled, but what we don't have is a temporary disability insurance program in our country. We have workers' compensation in the states if you get injured on the job, but nothing if you have a disability or an injury that's not job-related or not long-term. We need to fill that gap. Secondly, we obviously know that we're one of very few countries in the world that have no paid leave for when you have arrival of a newborn baby or newly adopted child in your home. There's only 2 states that are doing that. And thirdly, that we have no paid family leave if you need to take time off to care for a seriously ill family member. Those are the 3 reasons and the gaps that we think need to be filled in terms of the next social contract. Katie mentioned what this process was about. We came together as 2 universities, 2 law schools, working together as a team. We had several people from Berkeley who have been thinking and writing extensively about this for years, Stephen Sugarman and Jillian Lester, who worked with me very closely, and with Angela Clements, who was our legal fellow, really working together on this. What we did is we did an extensive research review of the data of the social science review, and as Betsey said, very unfortunately, there's a lot we don't know. But what we do know is some of what Betsey started in her framing is that there's been these profound demographic changes. We're not just talking about women in the workforce, however. We're also talking about the fact that people are living longer, they're working longer. They, in order to allow them to work longer, you've heard the proposals for Social Security to keep people in the workforce. We need to make sure that they have the ability to take time off when they need to care for their own serious illness, and we haven't yet done that. We also know that there have been major improvements in modern medicine. It used to be that you'd get a diagnosis of cancer, and it would mean, very sadly, that you were not going back to work ever. But now we know that with a diagnosis like that, there are many people who can take the time away they need to get the health treatments they need, and they can come back to work. But today we also know that those temporary disabilities don't come with paid leave. So we're really looking at that research. We also were looking at what Katie and Betsey both talked about, the fact that the private sector has very patchwork of policies that allow you to take some paid leave or some unpaid leave, but we don't have a comprehensive system. And we also looked at what did the research say about the effect of paid family leave? What would it really mean? Well, what we saw in terms of the social science research is that these paid family leave, we know, improves the health and well-being of children and their caregivers. Children are better off when their parents are able to take time away from them, not only when they're first born, but when they're ill. We also know it provides greater economic security for families, allows people to stay attached to the labor force, which is good for our overall economy. And it also has better business outcomes, or at least neutral business outcomes, which is to say it's not bad for business. And I think that's really important. And in addition, as Betsey noted, it improves gender equity. What we did in constructing this proposal is we really set out 6 goals for ourselves of what we wanted to see in the end when we had a proposal together. The first is we wanted to focus on the primary sources of workforce conflict. So I talked about illness of a child, newborn child, seriously ill family member. We also wanted to make sure that there was universal access to paid time off across gender, across income, across life stages, across industry and occupation. That's not happening now, and we extensively document that in the report. We also want to make sure that we are supporting people who are working and that we keep them in the labor force. So this is not intended to be a welfare program for people to stay out of the workforce. It's intended to figure out how do we keep people attached to the labor force, which is good for their short-term income security and for their long-term income security. We also really looked at, we wanted to make sure that we were ensuring efficient delivery of benefits so that people would get their income replacement when they needed it, not months later. We also wanted to make it budget neutral. So what we've proposed, you'll soon see, is that we need to spread the cost among employers and employees rather than increasing the federal deficit. And we also wanted to account for employers' interest in predictability and administrative ease. We don't want this to be another burden on employers. Recently, there's a new study by 2 academics, Ruth Milkman and Eileen Applebaum, about the California paid family leave, which shows that it's working. It's not burdening employers. It's not creating great administrative problems. So what I want to do is I want to take you through this chart, and I'm not very proficient. And do you know how to do this? Thank you so much. Okay, so what I'm going to do is to take you through what are we proposing here. What we're proposing is, as I said, really paid family leave. We're calling it family security insurance to really emphasize that this is really about family economic security. What we do is we have 3 parts to the program. What I'm going to do first is to talk about who's eligible for the program. So as you can see from this chart, which is also in your handout in case you can't read this, the first thing we talk about is a qualifying event. Who qualifies? 3 different ways in which you qualify. One is you become disabled yourself. You have a serious health condition, which includes pregnancy, which renders you unable to work for a short period of time, which is important. The second thing that we do is we say the other qualifying event is you have the birth of a child or the placement of a child in your home, either through adoption or foster care. The third way in which you become qualified for family security insurance is that you need to take care of someone with a serious health condition, and that person is in need of care, which is another important piece of this. In addition to that, you have to be eligible for the program. We really, as I said, focused on keeping people attached to the labor market. We looked really extensively at both what is provided in the FMLA, what are states doing, what are other countries, what are other OECD countries doing, and how do we make sure that people have sufficient labor market attachment so that they're likely to come back. So what we propose is that they actually had to have a minimum of 950 hours worked over a period of about a year, and we can talk about the base period. They can do that for multiple employers. What that ends up working out to be is it means that somebody can work part-time, about 20 hours a week, and they can still take 4.5 weeks off during the year, and they'll qualify for this. So it's a lower minimum standard than the FMLA. It's a little bit higher than what we're requiring people in California and in New Jersey, because we felt like we really wanted to make sure that this wasn't a payment for people to kind of ease out of the workforce, but rather to keep them attached. And we said that all employers had to be covered, as they are in California and New Jersey. Okay, so what are the benefits? How long do you get to take off? How much money do you get when you take the time off? In terms of duration, we didn't, some proposals on paid family leave tie it to FMLA and say it just should be 12 weeks. We really looked carefully at what we were trying to provide to people and thought about the different benefit levels. For temporary disability insurance, the purpose of taking that time off is so that you're able to fully recover. In California, you're actually able to take up to 52 weeks of time off if your health requires that you need to have that time off. We didn't think that we could justify that long in terms of the budget impact of employers and employees paying for this program, but we did think that it was important that you had the time for full recovery, and so we said that it should be an annual duration of up to 26 weeks. That doesn't mean everybody who becomes disabled gets 26 weeks off. In fact, in California, where the maximum is 52 weeks, people take on average about 17 weeks. If you're pregnant, you would get the medical standard of about 6 weeks off for your temporary disability, or longer if you have a C-section. In addition to that, we looked really at the parental care and at the caregiving and looked at what should we provide. And we fell in those areas on 12 weeks. The reason we did that is we really looked at what does it mean in terms of baby bonding and be able to provide that care. Remember, both parents can take this leave, so the child will have time if there are multiple parents involved to have time with their child. And then on caregiving insurance, we really went back and forth on this one, trying to decide should we tie it to the disability insurance or to caregiving. And in the end, we decided that 12 weeks was the maximum. It is aligned with FMLA. But we also were really, and I'll talk a little bit about who qualifies, but we wanted to make sure that this didn't get out of hand, because we actually have a pretty broad definition of family. So we didn't want to have weaken the labor force attachment by encouraging women to take off time to care for their grandparents and their parents and their aunts and uncles and never getting back to work. So we actually dealt with that by putting a cap on the maximum duration that you could take a leave, which is 26 weeks for caregiving insurance. We looked really hard at wage replacement. How do you make sure that you incentivize people and give them enough money so that they're able to take the time off? There are 2 different ways of looking at this. One is the wage replacement, and the other is the maximum benefit amount. California and New Jersey do it slightly differently. California only offers about 55% wage replacement, but they have a very high maximum benefit allowance. New Jersey offers a higher percentage, about 2/3, but they have a very low maximum benefit amount. I bring that up because, interestingly, the number of men who are taking this insurance in California is much higher, even in the first year, than in New Jersey, partially because men are often the primary breadwinners in the family. As we know from the wage gap, they're making more money. And so you need to incentivize men as well as women to be able to take this up. And so you need to replace the income in a way that provides income security and also incentivizes people to, in fact, take this leave. So what we did is we said it should be 80% for disability insurance and for caregiving insurance, but it should be 90% for parental leave, really to try to incentivize, as I said, men to take that. In terms of taxation, this is a lengthy discussion a lot of research on this, but in the end, we decided that benefits should be treated as taxable wages and for income and for payroll tax purposes. We also really thought there should be a waiting period because it was in some sense a show that this is really for longer periods of time. It's not for your everyday illnesses for a couple of days off. So we said that there has to be a 5 work days per year for a serious health condition. For parental care, we said none because you have a baby and your care is immediate. But we also said 5 work days for caregiving insurance. It allows for some people to also kind of, in some sense, it's a co-payment, which is I have to put in a little bit, but I get this insurance in the end. We really struggled with, can people take these in incremental ways. And what we did in the end is to say administratively it would be hard to deal with, so we did 5 days or more, and we can talk more about that. Okay, so how are you going to pay for this? How are you going to finance it? How have others financed it? We looked at that, and in the end, we came down with a payroll tax, contributions made on a pre-tax basis, split 50-50 between employers and employees, and said that the self-employed should get to should be required, in fact, to do this and would have to pay 100%. This is the same. The self-employed piece is the same as Social Security. The employers is a little different than the states are doing. Politically, the states haven't been able to get the employers to pay in, so they're putting it all on the employees. In California, New Jersey, the employees pay 100% of the payroll tax to support these programs. Anybody who kind of studies these things knows that even if you split it between employers and employees, the research shows that oftentimes the costs get shifted to the employees. But we still felt it was important that employers buy in and pay into this program. And I'll just run through the last couple of things. Administratively, we felt like there are 2 different ways you could do it. You could either do it by a single agency, the Department of Labor or the Social Security administering a national program, or you could build it up. And I think it will really depend on kind of how far we get along on these state-based programs, but you could build on top of the states, or at least on top of the state infrastructures that we have in place to provide unemployment insurance benefits, for example, the different state departments that offer those, administer those programs. And that's, so we recommend both or either of those. We also thought it was incredibly important that we make sure that people have job protection or at least didn't get retaliated against. We didn't think that was appropriate to actually mesh this together. FMLA provides job protection. It doesn't go far enough. We recognize that. We recommend that FMLA be expanded, but we didn't put that as a specific part of this. Most OECD countries that do this, in fact, all of them that we found, separate out the job protection from the social insurance piece. So that's our really broad brush of our project. I'm just going to say several words before turning it over. Oh, I'm sorry. You can ignore that. I was just showing you. Let me just say several words about the economy, because I think it's on everybody's mind. Every time I talk to this, people say, oh, that's nice, Anne. That's not going to happen. So we're very cognizant of the fact that this, the first reaction is a lot of skepticism as to timing. We are in the recession. The government's debating how to deal with the deficit. We're about to shut down the government. What are you doing? But the fact of the matter is, it's not as though these costs are not being borne right now. And I think that's a really important thing for us to remember, is the fact of the matter is this is already a problem we're paying for. But the people who are paying for it are our families. They're bearing all the burden of this risk. And it has deeply troubling implications for our economy. I did a kind of second study with Maria Shriver and a team of people looking at Alzheimer's and looking at elder care issues. And with an economist, we discovered that for families who have or are taking care of an elderly person in their family with Alzheimer's, they're spending about $56,000 a year to pay for paid caregiving expenses and to pay for healthcare costs. That doesn't even account for the amount of time that they're taking unpaid time off to provide care themselves. This is extremely costly. And families don't actually have the insurance to pay for these costs. They don't have, most families don't have long-term care insurance to pay for the paid caregivers. We know because we don't have paid family leave, they don't get income support to pay for their unpaid care. And we no longer have our old-fashioned system of insurance where we had a woman at home who could step up to the plate. So making families bear all this risk really hinders caregivers from fully participating in work and in our economy. It means lost productivity. It means retraining costs for businesses. It means lost income. And it ultimately means less money in the economy. So we believe that this is something we can hardly afford not to think about today. In terms of next steps, we recognize this is a hard conversation to have, but we're delighted that Michael and Lauren are thinking about this next social contract. These are conversations that need to happen today so that in 5 years, maybe 10, maybe longer, we can all talk about the work that we did to begin to lay the foundation for what ultimately will become paid family leave in our country. Thank you.
Thank you. If I could ask our speakers to come sit up here for the discussion section. We'll be joined by Lauren Damme, a policy analyst at the Next Social Contract Initiative. While they're taking their seats, let me make 2 points. The first is that we're really delighted to discuss this particular proposal because it shows that the debate is maturing to the point that there are well thought out plans. We don't endorse any particular plans. We're not in that business. But it shows you that the question increasingly is not whether to do this, but how. And people are giving a great deal of thought to the different, and this is one particular approach. There are others which we can discuss now. The other point I'd like to make before we go into the question period and following Lauren's comments is that the Next Social Contract Initiative is looking at the 2020s and the 2030s. So we're in about halfway through the aftermath of what is called a balance sheet recession, in which households are saving and not spending. That's one of the reasons delaying the recovery as they pay off this overhang of debt from 10 or 20 years of a speculative bubble. This will not last forever. Households are saving at a respectable rate. There's a danger that you could get in sort of a Japanese situation where you're kind of fluctuating between recovery and not, which we're quite cognizant of. But the point will come at some point in the 2020s or the 2030s when we're out of this, hopefully sooner rather than later. And at that point, we believe that the present insistence of part of the political community that the federal government's on the revenue side must be capped at 19% of GDP will be a thing of the past. This will be forgotten. Right now, the federal government is spending, I think it's about 25% of GDP. Some of that is emergency. But if you look at most other OECD countries, they spend about 40% on average, federal, state, and local, or their equivalent. It's a reasonable guess that the U.S. will be towards the low end. Right now, we spend maybe around 35%. But that in a decade or two, the U.S. will spend 35 to 40% of GDP with an aging population, even if you get health care under control. And particularly if you get health costs under control, that opens up revenue that you can use to expand and fill out the social safety net. So while the particular proposal is revenue neutral, I think realistically, the federal government is going to raise taxes. So we're not going to run permanent deficits the way we have since Ronald Reagan. We may be forced into doing it because of a fiscal crisis, but at some point, the taxes will be raised, some revenues will be cut, hopefully largely through cost controls of health care. And then we can have a conversation about spending more than we do now. But with that, I'd like to ask Lauren Damme. She'll give her thoughts on this and maybe ask a question. Is the microphone working?
I think so. Can you hear me? Okay.
Thanks.
Well, first of all, I want to thank Betsy and Ann and Katie for coming and speaking here today. As Ann mentioned, we think this is incredibly important to set some sort of thoughtful foundation for the long term in terms of building family security insurance or family security in general. My first question was for Betsy. I'm really glad that you mentioned that the Obama administration has state paid leave grants in its budget. And I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about the difference between having something that is a hybrid state-federal agreement between federal and state governments to provide paid family leave and the two other forms of family leave that are possible for the federal government to facilitate, which is unfunded mandates upon businesses, or federal security insurance, which is more like what the family security insurance is.
Okay. So I think the best thing is just to point out that we have obviously examples of all three of those in our social safety net right now. The Social Security obviously is something that works through as a completely federal program, and the unemployment insurance system, which might be actually the system I know best right now, is something that works as a hybrid. And so let me just focus my comments then on the hybrid model. And I think right now I see both the benefits and the costs of that. The costs are obviously that different states do different things, and if you have a vision for what we would want to say provide with unemployment insurance, some states are doing something. We encourage states to do certain things through providing money with our UI modernization grants. Not all states wanted our money to do those things that we wanted them to do, and that choice and that flexibility means that they're making different policies. I think, though, I think what's good about that is that different places do have different needs and different parts. Not all Americans agree on the system that they want. And the nice thing about allowing states to set up different systems is they're able to meet the demands of their particular constituent. And so we don't necessarily need a one-size-fits-all model, but we can have, 50 different models that meet the needs of the different communities. So I think that's one of the things that works really well about the state and federal hybrid system. A federal-based system, and we were talking about this a little bit earlier, does have the advantage of providing stabilization during an economic downturn. And I think again, using the UI system, we know that UI is an incredibly important stabilizer when it comes to an economic downturn. So, the unemployment's a vicious cycle. Somebody loses their job, and because they've lost their job, they spend less money. The places where they normally spend money are not getting money from them, so they face cutbacks, and some of them lay people off, and on and on and on. And what UI does is actually cushions that. And it might surprise you to know you need studies for this, but we've seen with studies that people spend more money when they get UI than they would spend if they didn't have UI. So spending cuts when someone's laid off are reduced when they actually get these UI benefits. And what's difficult is that states, particularly with balanced budget amendments, often are unable to provide what they need are unable to provide this kind of stabilization. And I think in this particular recession, one of the things that really benefited us a lot is the fact that we passed federal emergency UI support earlier than we did in any other recession in the past. And I'm not sure everybody realizes that, but the emergency unemployment compensation, which actually passed under President Bush, that is the earliest in a recession we have ever extended UI benefits past 26 weeks. We've done it in every recession, but we typically wait till the recession's actually over, unemployment's a serious problem, and then we pass the extension. We did that this time early, and it really increased the stabilization that it could provide. And so I think when you think about things like providing stabilization, that works better at the federal system, at the federal level, and that's one advantage of federal programs. When it comes to unfunded mandates on businesses, I think there's just lots of different ways to do that. There's I guess some people would say that's what FMLA is, I guess, right? Because it says it gives job protection, and employers of a certain size are faced with needing to hold that job open. There's actually been lots of studies that show that a lot of these things are actually, if they aren't beneficial to business, they at least do no harm, as Anne said. So, I think there's a role for all three. And obviously I'm not going to endorse any particular model on paid family leave right now, but I think it's worthwhile keeping in mind the pluses and minuses of the three models.
Well, my next question is for Anne and Katie. So you have 12 weeks put in for paid family leave for a new child in your program. And the OECD average, if some of you aren't aware of it, is about 18 weeks. So I was wondering, this is so much, granted, we have nothing now. We're so far behind the rest of the developed world on paid family leave issues. But this is much less generous, actually, than is normal for a country of equivalent wealth. And I was wondering if you could talk a bit more about your decision to propose 12 weeks as opposed to something more generous.
Yeah, so there's really, I would say two things. One is, as some people know, that the research shows that some of the OECD countries that offer very generous leave, 2 years, 3 years, is actually quite problematic for labor force attachment. The longer you stay out of the labor force, the more difficult it is that you see women coming back into the labor force. So one of the things that we were really cognizant of from a gender equity perspective and an income security perspective is actually not making it too long such that people didn't come back in. That said, 12 weeks versus, a 6-month period, I think you could have real questions there, both in terms of the bonding issues and otherwise. We thought at a minimum it needs to be 12 weeks in terms of breastfeeding support for new mothers, in terms of bonding. One of the things that we really did is we looked at the fact that both women and men would be able to take this leave. So while it's true that the parental care piece is of only 12 weeks, what you're going to see is that women who are on pregnancy leave actually get 6 weeks, and then they can take 12 more weeks of parental care. So that's 18 weeks for a birth mother, and then if there's another parent, then the second parent, non-birth parent, would be able to take another 12 weeks. So it really is quite a long time in terms of the health of the child, and it's really quite equitable in terms of gender. So I think that gets you up to something like almost 9 months, right?
Finally, Katie, if you could tell us a bit more about the decision to separate paid family leave, temporary disability, and caregiving leave, and the impacts of that on families.
No, that's interesting. I think, first of all, it was easier to track some of the data. Mm-hmm. So just one of the things we spent a lot of time doing was trying to piece together what do we know from what's happening on the ground, both through the big national data sets, but also in talking with employers. So we spent a lot of time trying to figure out, where's the problem. So number one, I think when you think about temporary disability insurance, there are some short-term disability and policies on the books. There are some TDI programs in the states. So it's just a little easier to analyze what was happening when you split that out. But also in terms of the parental care, as Anne just explained in terms of the different numbers of weeks and how you piece those together, we did have a very explicit goal there of trying to get men, fathers, to take that time. So we were able to do both in terms of we talked a lot about the reimbursement rates in terms of how to incentivize that, and then breaking out the caregiving. And as Anne said, on caregiving, one thing we know from the data is that people aren't living in these kinds of, traditional nuclear families where you're just taking care of your partner and your kid, that there are these, extended circles out. So we wanted to really show how broad that definition of family is, and then complement it, as Anne explained, with some limits on the number of weeks, et cetera, and how long you could take it. So I think it was really almost it started off as an analytical frame, but also it allowed us to make some much more granular choices depending on which bucket you were in, about eligibility, number of weeks, what you can take it for, and how does it work almost a little more holistically in terms of thinking about other caregivers, other parents.
And I know that one of the problems with the FMLA is if you take leave for caregiving for a new child, then if someone gets ill in your family or you get ill, then you've lost that job-protected unpaid leave at a later date. So that's something we like about your proposal.
Well, thank you. We have about 15 minutes for questions from the audience. Please wait until the microphone comes to you. And if this being Washington, you're supposed to identify your institution, but you don't have to. So plain old citizens are fine too. Questions? Right up here.
Hi, thanks for the talk. That was nice. I'm Ryan with The Nation magazine. I'm wondering, kind of building off of what you had just spoken of with the extended family issue, what you would think of possibly working in kind of bridging the intergenerational gap and incorporating a grandparental leave program into it, which could also kind of extend the time period beyond. Because I think one of the problems promoting this practically to constituents is that, like in the last, in the 2008 exit polls, people 60 and over comprised about 21% of the electorate, and in 2010 it rose to 33%. And these very same people are pretty, ironically, they're the ones most against the kind of social welfare system and the ideology. They're very much for the ideology of limited government, and they're also the ones talking most about family values and this kind of vacuous phrase that they like to use. It's become vacuous, but I'm wondering, what do you think are the what do you think is the possibility of incorporating grandparental leave into this?
And one thing I'm just going to do, just a follow-up question to you, just to clarify, and this is, I think, actually an example of why we have these three buckets. So when you say grandparent leave, are you thinking about, so a grandparent who is working, who either then wants to take time off for their own illness, take time off to care for a newborn that might not be their own,
or a retiree,
right, or caregiver for someone else?
Yeah, so I was trying to look up, so the answer is that it is in here, and I was just trying to get the exact definition of family, but maybe Katie can find it for me. But what we did is we really struggled with this issue to make sure that we didn't want to limit to it, as the FMLA has done, to really quite a limited circle of people, a child or a parent or a spouse. And so instead, we looked at trying to expand it so that we actually based it on the definition in which federal workers can take leave for paid sick days to care for somebody. So it's a much broader. It includes grandparents, and it includes a number of other people, including we have in there somebody who may not be related to you, but who you have a close affinity to, which is what the federal workforce allows their workers to do. And so it's very broad. And the reason we did that is we felt like it shouldn't be our decision as to who you are close to and have a family-like relationship with, in which you want to provide care and you're needed to provide care. So the way we dealt with that in terms of making sure that there wasn't abuse of it, or that people didn't take there wasn't a kind of a moral hazard problem where they took too much leave. That's why we capped the caregiving insurance. You can take it for a very broad range of people, but you can't keep taking it over and over again. And so we've capped it in that way. But we do very much support this idea of intergenerational, and the idea that there's a rising number of grandparents who are raising their grandchildren. There's the issue of the aging workforce, in which grandparents continue to be in the workforce. So it's a very needed and necessary update.
Dr. Stevenson, any thoughts?
Well, I think that you bring up what's the interest to an older generation, and I think that it's twofold. It's actually having people who are able to care for them, as well as their being able to take time off to care. And I think both of those things, as I've heard, have been addressed in this plan.
And just so you can look at our report, page 67 lays all that out.
Page 67 of the report. Back corner.
Mark Gruenberg from Press Associates Union News. A question for Dr. Stevenson. You mentioned the fund that the president has proposed in his budget, which may or may not fall victim to our friends. I'm being facetious on Capitol Hill. But you haven't talked about what the Secretary is planning to do to push this wider family leave program. And let's put this in context. Rosa DeLauro has been trying to push this for a couple of years now, and she couldn't even get it through a Democratic Congress, much less this bunch. Talk about what the Labor Department is planning to do on the wider issue, not just the fund.
Right. Well, the Department of Labor does think that this is a very important issue, and as I said, I'm an economist, and particularly an empirical economist. So I think the most important thing is that we're gathering lots and lots of data. But for those of you who are less nerdy, one of the things that we've been doing as our Women's Bureau has been out having events all over the country, dozens of events, promoting the importance of workplace flexibility, of family leave, of these issues. Secretary Solis is herself going across the country and talking at these events and talking about how important these issues are for families and for employers. So this, as I said, is an important issue to her because it's really, I think, part of the core of a good job, a job that is compatible with family, with your life is I think really at the essence of what a good job is. And I think that's one of the reasons why there's actually so many people at the Department of Labor who have interest in and knowledge and are working on these issues. And in fact, I think one of the things when I got there as chief economist and someone who had, but as someone who, as an academic, has worked on issues of gender and family and work my whole career, I found that I had a large number of other people who were also deeply ingrained in working on these issues. And I think that great coverage that she has really helped to move the issue forward.
Yes, other questions?
Hi, my name is Nancy Rankin, and I'm a senior fellow at A Better Balance. I've been working on these issues, both of the related issue of paid sick days in New York and paid family leave at New York State. And you would think that this would be a no-brainer for New York State, since we're already one of the states with a TDI, and now business can't even say that, all the businesses would cross the Hudson and go to New Jersey, because we can say New Jersey already has this. And yet we face these arguments that we can't put another tax and another burden on business, even though the employees would be paying for it. That this would be a job killer, and even though we have this great research now from California, we still face this argument that it's a burden on business, that it's a job killer, that we can't do this in this current economy, and I'm just wondering what help we can get from the bully pulpit in Washington and from economists to refute these arguments and to help us, those of us who are really on the front lines in this fight.
Well, so the question is tax competition in a case where states, on their own initiative, one by one, adopt more generous policies.
Well, it's just, sort of what can be done to give us more ammunition and credible economic evidence to refute this job killer.
But are they wrong necessarily? That might be one of the cases for doing it everywhere at once, rather than state by state. Dr. Stevenson?
Well, we actually see the fear of sort of state competition on things that are actually usually bigger than their reality. So certainly, as I've heard people talk dozens of times about how, since the 90s, how the problem with the welfare system is, we're going to have, race to the bottom across the country, because how can we possibly sustain a state-based welfare system? And yet we do, and people move and businesses move less frequently than people predict. But I think as an economist, the argument is whether or not the tax is met, the tax provides something of value, right? And so if it provides something of value to the business and to the individual workers, then there's not an incentive to leave. And you might ask, well, economists might say, well, if it's a value to the business, why doesn't the business do it on their own? And we actually see lots of businesses do it on their own, but actually it can be very helpful for businesses to have everyone doing the same thing. And the thing that gets discussed over and over again is that if you're an individual business and you want to offer a generous leave policy or a generous maternity leave policy, the fear is that everybody who wants to have a baby wants to be employed at your firm, and those are the people who really want to be there. And if you can't, that your program can be abused in that way. And in that sense, firms benefit from having everybody have the exact same program, because then they don't have people trying to take advantage of them. And so to the extent that we think, and I actually truly believe that these programs provide value to not just the workers, but to the business. To the extent that they're providing value, these small tax increases that are required to fund the programs aren't going to lead them to pick up and leave. Because when they pick up and leave, they're not going to just avoid the tax, but they're also going to lose the benefit of the program. And what the program gives them is a workforce that is, that is, I think, more productive and less stressed, more productive, and better able to be better able to balance their work and family lives. And so I think that's the best argument, and certainly as the administration believes that we'll have a more efficient economy, we'll have a more productive economy, and we'll have a more innovative economy when people are better able to balance to integrate their work and family lives.
Ann O'Leary?
Yeah, I was just going to add to that, which I think is exactly on point. One thing I just wanted to say, first, thank you, Nancy, for being here. I've read your work for a long time, and you've contributed so much to this field. In terms of the businesses, one of the things we found in California is that there's actually more people who work at large businesses who are taking advantage of California paid family leave. Part of the reason is this actually saves large businesses some money, in the sense that many of these large businesses had already been offering paid family leave, and now the employee tax is at least paying for a portion of that, so they're just topping off the benefit. So as Betsey said, it provides this kind of even-handedness and competition, and for those who are doing a good job already, in some sense it's a win-win in the sense that it provides them with some savings.
Mm-hmm. And just one last comment, and this is less specifically to your question, but just the fact that it was you, Nancy, that asked it. I do want to say, and I think this goes to something Michael mentioned earlier, our report rests on top of a whole lot of work that's been done over the last 10, 20, 30 years that has been done in the context of public policy, whether you're looking at the state and local level. It's been done in the context of the private sector and looking at business practice. That's been done in the context of the academy, where we have, our colleague Betsey Stevenson is from, in terms of really analyzing the data and almost like connecting the dots between these different issues. So I think that one thing I just wanted to say is our report, I feel like there are two levels to it. One, it goes to the previous question. There almost has to be a slight culture shift on what our expectation is around these issues and other issues related to flexibility. So that, in a sense, this is something I know Ann and I have talked about before, that, in 15 or 20 years, we would look back and go, gosh, I can't believe we lived like that. Like, that was crazy. Like, why didn't we have these policies on the books? Like, how were we surviving? But I think right now, at least, for me, I've gone around the country and talked to so many people, individuals, employers, community leaders, and it's like your head is down just trying to get through the day, and you are cobbling together. You are piecing it together. You're feeling stressed, but it's very much your individual problem. And I think that what we were trying to do with this report was twofold. One, it's actually, here you go. We just wrote a 160-page report in detail on how you could actually do this and achieve it and ease a lot of the stress and financial burden and other things going on. So guess what? Here it is. So it's not a question of how you could do it, and our report's just one of many. You know, there's lots of state examples. We've got a proposal out of the Center for American Progress. I mean, lots and lots of ideas. So, okay, here you go. And I think it does go back to the question of why not? You know, and that's where I feel like your point, I'm a little more optimistic, you know. I don't know if it's 20 years, you know, I'd like to see this in 5 to 10 years, and I feel like it's doable because the need is there, but it's about getting our arms around it and saying this is actually an issue we need to address as a society. It's not just your problem or your problem over there. And by the way, you know, there's lots of good ideas on how to do it. So I think, you know, I invite a lot of proposals on this. I would love to see, you know, an active critique on this particular proposal from the business community, because that's what will create the dialogue and the debate and actually surface it up and out of our own individual day-to-day problem.
Let me follow up with one thing on this, which is I think about this a lot in the context of how I've been answering a lot of questions about the Health Care Act. And one of the things that we see in the context of healthcare today is that there are too many people who are choosing their jobs based on the healthcare that they need rather than how productive they can be in their job. And so we really believe that removing that constraint, letting people choose their job based on where they can be the most productive worker, and letting them their healthcare be a separate decision is going to improve the economy, will create more jobs, and will add to economic growth. And I think this fits into that same bucket of discussion, that whenever you have people choosing their job not based on how they're going to perform in that job, but based on things like whether they're going to have health care, whether they're going to be able to take time off to care for their kids, we get a misallocation of resources. And a misallocation of resources makes us less productive as a society. And so when we adopt the social programs that allow people to make better decisions about where to work, decisions that are based on what they can do at that job, not based on the amenities that job gets, we improve as a nation. And that's what the Health Care Act is going to do for us. And I think that, you know, and that we should be thinking about those issues, you know, job lock, people misallocating because of benefits when we're thinking about these issues related to leave.
Please join me in thanking our panelists.
We're glad we saw that you guys have written this.
Thank you. It was nice to meet you.